Mondays can be tough. Right, Trace? Are Mondays tough? Yeah, Mondays are tough. We already used the H word for Sesame Street, for hate. I hate Sesame Street. So, I had to delay coffee talk for a moment just while we got that straightened out. But I think we're back on track. All right, a couple things I think you should know as you start off your week this week. We have the president traveling to El Paso, Texas today, and he's going to be holding a rally tonight basically at the border. And one of the reasons he's doing that is to garner support for the additional border wall or border barrier funding that he would like from Congress before the end of the day on Friday. By 12:01 on Saturday, the funding for the government that was provided after this partial government shutdown goes away. And so the president has threatened to go ahead with another shutdown if he does not get the funding that he wants for the border wall. Remember last week that we talked that there was a bipartisan group of lawmakers, senators, congressmen that came together outside of the White House, outside of the eye of the media, and have been working on a deal. And as we went into the weekend, it looked like there were some positive feelings about a deal coming together. There wasn't a deal yet, but there was some sort of feeling that we're going to get close on this. So, and what was really big is House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who has previously said she's giving no funding for the border wall at all to the president, said that she would support what this group came up with, which presumably would include some border wall funding. But now apparently the group is hitting a little bit of a snag, and it has to do, again, according to reports, over detention beds. Part of the border security funding wasn't just for the border wall, it was for other things, more federal judges to process people, for example, and more detention beds for ICE. And so what appears to be a real rub in this negotiations is Democrats want to limit the number of detention beds that ICE can have. That would limit the amount of people that ICE can detain. Democrats say this is a way that law enforcement would have to prioritize the worst of the worst and deport them and not deport others that may be applying for asylum. But you can tell that Republicans would say, well, wait a minute, you can't just limit law enforcement. You can't just put a limit on what they need to do. They need to be able to make the judgment call that they need to make. So apparently that's where there's a little bit of a stall in negotiations of where things look like they were moving in the right direction. Now there's a big question about whether or not we'll have any sort of a deal. So that's where the border stands today. One of the things you're going to see on our website, and I encourage you to check it out, is what is actually happening at the border right now. My husband's making bacon, just so you know. It's not like a sound effect for border wall. We have plenty of sound effects in our household, but that was not on purpose. You know, I was wearing a bridge shirt before I started this, and I was like, I should put on a sweatshirt and cover that because someone might think that I'm making a statement about bridges, not walls. Remember that? I was like, okay, we have to be neutral. We can't do that. Anyways, what I think you should know about what's happening at the border wall right now is there's about a third of the border that does have some sort of a barrier, and that's relatively new, as in a recent decade worth of work. What the president's asking for in almost $6 billion of funding would cover an additional 200 miles of the border, but it would in no way complete the border overall. So while you have about 650 miles of border wall or border barrier constructed, you still have 1,300 miles that have no barrier. Some of those miles, you wouldn't have a barrier because there's a river, for example, but some of them can have it. And Customs and Border Patrol says there's 17 areas that they would really like to have a border barrier, and that would cost billions and billions of dollars. So check out that card today because construction is taking place at our border, mainly to replace older fencing that we had and update it. And this year there is some funding that would allow about 60 miles of new border construction to take place. So just want you to know, outside of the political debate, here's what's happening at the border for you. Okay. So that's a big story of the day. In the meantime, you have another Democrat entering the presidential race, Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, senator from Minnesota, moderate. She's very popular in Minnesota, or has been, and is really close to Iowa, you know, geographically. And that can give Democrats and Republicans, if they have an in Iowa momentum as they head into wondering who's going to get the nomination for the party. So again, the field is growing. Elizabeth Warren officially announced, we knew that she was going to do it, more or less she telegraphed that, but she officially announced this weekend as well. So you have more Democrats jumping in to presidential politics while this is happening. So this also, remember, the timing of all of this debate over the border wall and where we are in the cycle really matters, because lawmakers want to take stands moving into election years that maybe they would be more lenient on, or more have more negotiating power if they weren't in an election cycle. So just something else to consider. I want to really just tell you what's going on with measles. We've talked a lot about that over the last few days because I think it's really important. So what's happening in Washington State is there's a state of emergency there over a measles outbreak. It happened in a community called Clark County, and really this has started a conversation about measles in America again. Yes? Wait, you want to sit with me? Okay. So.
We want to sit.
Wait, what? Okay, you have been vaccinated. So I'll cuddle with you. Actually, we should know that all the vaccinations are not 100%. That's something else. Okay, Liberty, go. Can you watch Sesame Street just for a second?
No.
I'll be right back. I'll be right back. You can sit right there. Okay. Hold on, there's some hot tea right here. What I really wanted to look into in this kind of measles debate that's reemerging, and let me explain why. In the area of Washington State, there are...
Can I slide, Mommy?
Can you slide?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. In the area of Washington State where a measles outbreak took place, most of the cases are for children under 10. And in that county, the vaccination rate for school-age kids is less than 80%. Doctors believe you need at least 90 to 95% for contagious diseases to be contained. It's called herd immunity. Washington State is one of the states in the country, there's 17 of them, that allow physical or personal exemptions for vaccinations. So that means you can say, I just don't agree with this for moral reasons, so I'm not going to vaccinate my kids. Most states allow some sort of exemption for religious reasons, medical reasons, for example, although those are rare. I was curious, why do your states get to control whether or not you vaccinate your kids? And they don't control it by law. This is what's interesting. They just can prevent that your children attend school. It's more of a policy than a law. And so it's a recommendation that the state makes, but if you're a parent, you either have to follow it or you don't send your kids to school. So here's a way to think about it. While the federal government doesn't set any sort of vaccination requirements at all on anyone, it makes recommendations. The federal government is responsible for your national security, while your state is really responsible for your personal security, which is why the state can set laws for, let's say, for gun ownership. You know why that varies state to state, and why it also can vary for vaccination rates. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that there's a debate reemerging in some of these states that have been very fervent about personal exemption, like Washington State, like Oregon, that are saying maybe we should not have a personal exemption. And the fight against that is that some lawmakers say, listen, we don't even allow peanuts in school because of what they can do to a child who has a peanut allergy. So why are we allowing kids not to be vaccinated? How does that make sense? That's the argument. Then you have parents that say, well, listen, the government should not dictate what I do as a parent. And where does this end? When does the government start telling me my kid has to weigh a certain amount? Obesity could be just as dangerous to our health as measles. I mean, this is the argument. So it's a very interesting debate. I'm curious what you guys think about it. Check out our card on it, because what we did, I broke down what's happening with the measles in America in 2 different cards. Just so you know, over the last 10 years, there's been times where there's a couple dozen cases of measles in America to almost 700 cases. So now we're at about just under 80 cases in the first month of 2019, and that's why doctors are concerned this is going to be a year where there's a lot of contagious cases. And just so you know, measles, some say, well, measles aren't that dangerous. Well, measles can definitely kill people, especially children. And it starts off like a cold. You may not even know it, and then you suddenly get this body rash. What's crazy about the measles is 2 hours after someone with the measles leaves the room is still contagious. So it's highly, highly contagious. And this is why healthcare professionals are really, really concerned about it, especially in these communities. You should check out on our source page for our measles card whether or not, what does your state look like? certain states in America, I believe one of them is Missouri, have a less than 90% vaccination rate for measles. Again, that's lower than the amount that the government would like to see, so that the community has this herd immunity. But it's an extremely interesting debate. It comes up. I know we all, as parents, confront what we want to do with vaccinations with our kids. No matter how many things I read, I always think about it. It's always some sort of internal debate about what we're, how and why we end up choosing to do that for our children. But to say like it's an easy decision that I don't even think about, for me, it's not, because I've done all these stories over the last 10 years that raise all these questions about vaccinations. I would say my husband probably is more clear on it. But I end up following the vaccination recommendations. That's what I end up doing, but not everyone does that. So I'm curious what you guys think about it, and if you'd like to hear more on it. So that's the state of what's happening in America right now. New York State, New Jersey, Washington State have outbreaks, all having to do with international travelers coming to the areas with low vaccination rates. And but 10 states overall have cases of the measles. So just something you should know. Finally, did anyone see the Grammys award last night? Casey Musgrave won for Best Album, but Diana Ross and Dolly Parton performed, and it was awesome. So if you're trying to waste a little time today, I would look up Dolly Parton's performance and Diana Ross's performance, just for fun. Okay, so we're having celebratory fire in the kitchen with our laser gun, so that's my cue to get off of this. All right, a lot of news to follow this week. Continue to check out our website, smarternews.com, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.